Hey, what's happening? So welcome to Mates TV for what is becoming a pretty regular occurrence of me sitting in this room and giving my opinion on some genuinely horrendous opinions by the boys on the 888 Sport YouTube channel. This week, they're talking about punditry, bias towards Liverpool in the punditry, and the best and worst overall pundits. All pretty interesting topics, so I'm going to delve into some of them myself. But first, they've been saying this.
Why have I got a Liverpool bias expert on every game? Every single game! Liverpool guys everywhere, from John Barnes to Dalglish to Redknapp to Collymore to... We can genuinely go on for like 10 minutes. Michael Owen, dreadful.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he's another one. He's another one. He's another one.
Owen, Savage, yeah, like these men are terrible.
Let's dissect it. First and foremost, is there a bias towards Liverpool in punditry? Maybe. There certainly was in the 90s. In the era that I grew up watching football, there was a massive bias in terms of... Now, I say bias, what I mean is there was a lot of ex-Liverpool pundits. There has been through the 90s, the noughties, and up till now. Does that mean they're biased towards Liverpool? Theoretically, yes, it does. But what we're finding now, or what I'm starting to notice more, is that it doesn't necessarily mean that, because what has highlighted this is how many ex-Manchester United players there are currently as pundits. You've got the likes of Paul Scholes, Gary Neville, Roy Keane, Dwight York pops up every now and again, Louis Saha, periodically the likes of Giggs, etc, etc, etc. The point I'm driving at is you've got these guys who played for Manchester United during a really successful era for the football club. And what you would think is those guys have got this deep-rooted passion and intrinsic links to those clubs, so therefore they're going to give things a positive Man United spin. It doesn't happen that way. It actually happens in the flip reverse. And I know this because I had to live through this with the 90s with Liverpool, and you had the likes of Mark Lawrenson, surprisingly still going. I'll talk about him in a minute. Alan Hansen et al., once again, who come from the best period in Liverpool's history, and all of a sudden their job is to watch a really, really crap version of the football club that they had success with and to some extent love week in, week out. And therefore, what do? Do they put a positive spin on it? No, they absolutely slaughter that team. So what you're having right now is there's probably maybe a shade more Manchester United, ex-Manchester United pundits than there are current Liverpool pundits. But it doesn't mean that there's a pro-Manchester United bias. It actually means in some regards there's loads more Man United players slagging the club off left, right and centre. This notion, of course, that Gary Neville is somehow above all this is absolute nonsense, and nor should it be. The thing you've got to remember is that when you spend so long in a football club, particularly for the likes of Carragher and Neville, who are lads who grew up in the cities of those football clubs as well. Now, of course, Jamie Carragher famously grew up an Evertonian, but is a converted Red, so he still carries that, obviously, links to Liverpool Football Club. I find it really interesting. I think it's part of the strength of punditry in some regards, provided you're accepting that that bias exists within them. If you think you're getting pure unbiased punditry, because let's be honest, I think Gary Neville a lot of the time tries to sell himself this way, and I think Carragher tries. But if you're buying into that, then that's your fault for buying into that. The guys have a clear bias towards their football clubs for good or for ill. They try their best to hide it, but really, the biggest talking point for me, and I could do this all day long because I find it so interesting, is the overall quality of punditry in football coverage. Has it gotten better? Because it feels to me as though it hasn't, and part of this I think is nostalgic based. So I thought Alan Hansen was an absolutely tremendous pundit, but he was a tremendous pundit for his time, because when he first got into it, he was on Match Today, he wasn't so far removed from being a player. And I think that's what happens is that pundits get old, and all of a sudden their view on the game becomes a bit more jaded and a little bit more, I don't know, a kind of aggressive. And maybe that's to do with the fact that they look at how Graham Souness definitely, and to some extent of course Roy Keane as well, talk about modern footballers. They fucking hate them. They just hate them. They hate these lads with the mad haircuts and the mad boots. And I'm not saying they're necessarily wrong, but it does add a massive weight against the quality of their punditry at times, because, you know, it adds another layer of bias. You can really dislike a player and therefore find it very hard to analyse their performances in a truly analytical way. Paul Pogba, great example of this. Some lads just simply can't see past the haircuts and past the tricks and flicks and the hashtags to see the quality of football underneath. Now, that's not to say that Paul Pogba is beyond critique, because my God, quite clearly is, because for a lad of his talent, he probably should be a little bit better and he should be a little bit more dedicated, etc., etc. I'm not getting into the Pogba argument right now. It's a video in and of itself, and it's a really boring video. But overall, I think we're starting to see the quality of punditry increase, because once again, you're getting a generation of people who are starting to throw themselves into the analytics. And in this regard, I think Gary Neville is almost head and shoulders above most. And I think actually when you throw him and Carragher in together, I think you have a really, really good team, because they've got deep-seated, deep-rooted opinions. They've played the game quite recently, so it's not moved on too far from their careers. So they're not looking at a completely different sport that maybe a guy who played in the 70s and 80s. Football's massively different. The fundamentals are the same, but so much about the game has changed. Everything from the lifestyle and nutrition to the speed, and for God's sake, the rules. You know, offsides, back passes, fucking VAR. So we're starting to see this new breed of punditry that doesn't laugh in the face of analytics, because so much of football is so stuck in the dark ages with these regards. And the problem is you've got a bit of an old boys club, and this is why you've got the likes of Andy Gray and Richard Keys and all of their footballing dinosaurs who just go on there, who just like the sound of their own voice and talk about how things used to be. And, you know, Sam Allardyce is saying things like, oh, he's not sure about the quality of the Premier League in a season that saw the finalists for the two major European competitions being populated entirely from teams from the Premier League. Yeah, weird that, Sam. Weird. Perhaps a little bit bitter, perhaps a bit jealous, perhaps you've just had too many pints of gravy and it's starting to affect your thinking. Probably all of the above. But what you've got is, I think we're starting to see those old school pundits being shoved out, or rather being farmed out to different markets where people don't see through them, where people still see a value in their names and them being controversial and how they talk. We've got a generation, the mid-generation, who maybe should be a bit better, but are trained in that way of thinking. Like Mark Lawrenson, my God, you know, he heads a list of ex-players who I think just fucking hate football. Michael Owen's one of them. Does Michael Owen love football? I've seen instances where he said he does, but I find it very difficult to believe that he has that passion, because he was almost like brainwashed into being a footballer. And, you know, he had all the, if he had personality, it was long bred out of him through media training and what have you. But, you know, when these guys talk about Danny Murphy, is by all accounts a good guy, but he's got the Mark Lawrenson twang of a guy who just sounds so cheesed off with having to talk about football for a living. And that's why, flipping it back to the bias stuff, I actually don't mind pundits being a little bit biased, because it shows they've got passion, it shows they care about certain levels. And, you know, yes, it means that maybe you get a bit more out of Neville and Carragher when they're talking about, you know, Manchester United and Liverpool. Absolutely. I love hearing Gary Neville talk about Manchester United, because he knows what he's talking about and he's also passionate about the subject matter as well. So what we're hopefully finding is guys who understand the data and guys who have the passion for football. And to be fair, that's where my industry's come from, and where it's given, I think, the mainstream a little bit of a kick up the arse, because look, we're not ex-players, we're not professional pundits, we're not professional coaches or referees, but we watch every game, we watch every minute of every game, we hyper-analyse it, and we love the subject matter, we love the team that we're talking about, so we can talk about those teams till the cows come home. Whereas when you compare it to most pundits, I always come back to it. But Robbie Savage, no critique of him, although it's a massive critique of him, because he comes across as a controversial, for the sake of being controversial, knowledgeless bellend. But how's he supposed to watch 20 teams forensically? How's he supposed to watch every minute, every kick of every ball for every single football team? He can't. Things get lost in translation. But now we're starting to see the likes of Statman Dave being used on 5 Live. Brilliant, because there's a guy who's a fan, but he's also got the time to delve in and get the knowledge as well. In Liverpool, well, we've got the likes of Paul Tompkins. He's a fan, but he's also a professional analyst as well, which means he knows what he's talking about. And slowly but surely, we're bringing journalists more into the conversation. We're bringing intelligent, experienced ex-players, and we're also bringing people from outside as well who've got that kind of knowledge. And there's now starting to form a melting pot in the punditry world. Yes, it's taking a slow burn to get it into the likes of Sky and Match the Day, but we're starting to see it in the fringe stuff around it. We're starting to see it in Sky's YouTube coverage. We're starting to see it in the online world, in social media, on radio more and more, which I think bodes well overall for the overall coverage quality, because for too long, yes, you played football, great. It's brilliant that you played football. All respect in the world for you as a footballer and what you're able to do, more than I ever could. But honestly, there's people out there who have got a much greater grasp of the English language, vocabulary, and have actually watched games of football with a clear analytical eye, without it being conditioned by what you were taught to think football was by years and years and years of coaching, to see football in a particular way, or in fact how football was played in your era of football. So look, overall, I think the quality of punditry is still a bit crap in British footy. It's not as crap as it is in American coverage, because, you know, Robbie Mustoe, Steve Nicol and Robbie Earle, I'm sure all lovely fellas, but really, NBC, really? Is that all you've got? Shaka Hislop, power rankings? Give us a call, lads. Let us know your thoughts. Who are the best and worst pundits in your opinion in the comment section underneath. Commentaries, another conversation altogether. I'll do that on another day. So few good commentators. But yeah, who are the guys who you're genuinely interested to hear the insights and opinions of on mainstream coverage of football, and who from the outside world, not on mainstream TV, do you think would do a good job in that world as well? Look, go over to the 888 Sport channel, leave your opinions on their opinions on that as well. I'll be over there. I'll leave my little comment underneath, and make sure you subscribe to MateTV as well, on the road to 100,000 subscribers. Nice one. See you all soon.